All right. Friend, colleague, and also from the MMQB himself, Albert Breer, back here on the Rich Eisen Show. Good to see you, Albert.
Hey, what's up, Rich?
So,
how we doing?
anybody
land in Los Angeles that you know of recently?
Here we go. I was about to say, of all the coaching hires that you want to break, right? It's got to be Jim Harbaugh leaving Michigan to go somewhere.
That'd be a fun one.
So,
yeah.
but as you and I are conversing in the middle of the afternoon on this Tuesday after divisional playoffs, it does appear that Harbaugh's here talking to the Chargers, and that there's a lot of there's smoke and there's a fire, and he's there. They might not let him out of the building. Albert?
Yeah. So I think, I think that there's two tracks that the Chargers search is working on. Like the one track is the Harbaugh track. The other track, I think, is the contingency track. So they've continued to go through interviews with other people and continue the process. The calendar has changed a little. And so the way the NFL calendar works now, you can't bring in people in person until this week. So like if you can't just go through like a week of courting with one candidate and then reset after, or you put yourself way behind. So that's still going on. Over to your right. Over to your left, you have the Harbaugh piece of this, which to me, like, I don't think it's about money anymore. Like, because I know that there was a lot of talk about that. I'm not sure it's about money. I think this is about structure. This is about resources. This is about what you're going to put around me and what it's going to look like. And so, like, to me, the questions are things like, are you willing to pay Jesse Minter $3 or $4 million a year to come with me?
As defensive coordinator.
As defensive coordinator, what does my front office look like, right? And we've seen they've interviewed no less, and it might be more, but no less than 4 candidates that he's got connections to. 2 guys who have Baltimore roots, and Joe Ortiz and Ian Cunningham, Brandon Brown, the Giants assistant general manager, who he's got a relationship with, and Ed Dodds, the Colts assistant general manager, who he goes back all the way to Oakland with. So he's known for 20 years. So it looks like they're willing to hire a general manager to match with him. And then, and I think this is a key part, how does ownership involve itself in football? You and I both know the Spanos family is very involved. It's a family business, right? And John Spanos, Dean's son, has overseen the football operations side. Jim Harbaugh had problems with ownership in San Francisco. And so I certainly could see where for Jim, a big part would be like, how do I head that off now? How do I make sure that's not a problem now? And it's coming to a comfort level with how ownership is going to be involved on the football side. So I think all that stuff is what determines whether this gets pushed over the goal line or not. Like, and I think a lot of people were looking at money and stuff like that. And like, I think that was always going to take care of itself, because I do think like the Spanoses are, and the Chargers in general are sensitive to the idea they won't spend or that they're irrelevant in LA. And I think, getting Harbaugh addresses all of that. I think now it's sort of about like what you're putting around Jim and whether or not the setup is comfortable for him, which it sounds to me like they're willing to do what it takes to get this done.
Yeah, why not? I mean, honestly,
yeah,
especially since, this last several years was filled with Brandon Staley. We're going to stick with him, even though Sean Payton's sitting right here in Southern California on the Fox set. We're going to stick with him just after he blew a 27-7 lead in the playoffs. And then this year plays out to the point where they feel no choice but to fire him mid-season. And then Jim Harbaugh's sitting out there. And then what? He would go back to Michigan or wind up in Atlanta or somewhere else because it comes out the Chargers wouldn't give him whatever he felt comfortable,
right,
that he needed to feel comfortable. I mean, what that you can't have that.
Yeah,
right?
From a business standpoint, it'd be horrible, wouldn't it? I mean, you're
Sounds
out there.
like it. Yeah.
I mean, as far as like being relevant in Los Angeles, the chance that Harbaugh gives you to be that, and then to get the rug pulled from underneath you and you're not getting him, like now what do you have? Like, now what do you do? Do you go spend $25 million to go get Belichick to make up for it? You know what I mean? Like, it's almost like the cost of losing that now, with so many people assuming it's going to happen, could be heavier, So I think I personally think this has nothing to do with my allegiances. No. But I personally think like this is set up. I think I used the Parcells comparison with you a couple weeks ago, right? Like where it's like, I think he's the modern day Parcells as an NFL coach. The Chargers are ready to win now. Like that roster, like they're not going to be like Joey Bosa and Derwin James and Keenan Allen. Like those guys aren't going to be around forever. You know what I mean? Like, and maybe some of them won't be there next year. So like, I do think that there's an urgency with the group of players you have right now. There's, a need for some juice, in the market from a business standpoint. And, and you've got a quarterback there who can attract a guy like a Jim Harbaugh, so it just all lines up. And then on top of that, like geographically, he loves California. He went to high school in Palo Alto. He played for the Chargers. He coached for the Raiders at the start of his career. He coached at the University of San Diego. He coached at Stanford. He has a lot of ties to California. And so the geography to me is like almost a cherry on top. A lot of things line up here.
Yeah, he also retired Nick Saban here, first of the year.
That's right. Yeah.
Just pointing that out.
That's a notch you can't take off your belt. On the way to winning, on the way to winning that notch off your belt.
On the way to winning the national championship. Albert Breer here on the Rich Eisen Show. So, what is the latest with Belichick? What do you got for me on that one?
I think it's similar. Like I think it's like a lot of it would come down to structure with the Falcons, and whether or not they're willing to set things up a certain way. I think Rich McKay is a key figure here. Bill has been very critical of the competition committee over the years, both publicly and privately, and has had a real you-know-what across his you-know-what about the competition committee. So, and Rich McKay has been one of these guys who has been involved in football, but as guys have gotten fired from there, has survived over and over and over again. And so, how do Bill Belichick and Rich McKay match up? Because Rich McKay is one of the most trusted advisors to Arthur Blank. So there's that, right? Then there's Terry Fontenot, the personnel department. How does that match up? How does that work? Can Bill bring all of his infrastructure? How much power is Bill going to have in personnel, right? Is he going to be the guy with his finger on the trigger? And is Arthur Blank going to be comfortable with that after, what the Patriots roster looks like now? Again, I know I sound like a broken record saying a lot of the same things I was saying about, the Chargers with the Falcons, but I think it's the truth. I don't think this is about money. I think this is about structure. I think this is about it being set up a certain way. And, I do think Bill has in his head who he's going to bring with him if he goes. So that means you're probably, are you hiring Josh McDaniels with you? Are you hiring Joe Judge with you? Are you hiring Matt Patricia with you? A lot of guys I think are lined up and waiting for him, And so, again, I think more than just money, there are a lot of things that match up for the Falcons. Geography the same way with Harbaugh, the roster same way with Harbaugh. There are a lot of things that match up that are attractive to Bill here. I think, based on the way he's operated for the last 24 years in New England, there are also some requirements as far as the way he'd want it to be set up for him to take the plunge and do it again.
Well, I mean, then there's a matter of with Harbaugh going to the Chargers, he's got Justin Herbert sitting there. Who's going to be the quarterback in Atlanta, right?
I know, and that's the question, right? But hey, if you have Belichick, that probably attracts some people, right? Not everybody, but
who? It's not like the free agent market would be what? Would it be Kirk Cousins, Jimmy G?
Give you a fun one, or Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins would make a lot of sense. I think Kirk Cousins is the most sensible one. And Russell Wilson, just because Bill has collected players who are maybe a little over the hill, who used to be superstars. Bill collects those guys like action figures. Go back over the years, right? Think about
the Corey Dillon action figure, the Randy Moss action figure,
Chad Ochocinco, Joey Galloway, Tim Tebow. Some of them work out, some of them don't.
Okay,
but isn't it true?
No, I understand that, but Bill is also, he's got a window just like Arthur Blank in terms of needing to win right now.
Here's a fun name: Baker Mayfield.
Oh man. That's not a bad one.
He liked him in 18.
Okay.
They couldn't go up and get him. They weren't. They had just been in the Super Bowl, and Baker Mayfield went first overall, so it wasn't realistic. But Bill Belichick put Josh McDaniels on a plane the week of the draft to go work out Baker Mayfield in Norman, Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one that that's what's fascinating too about it too. The franchise tag costs could be $35 million at that position. Does Tampa, if the Falcons land Belichick, does Tampa have to franchise Baker to keep him away from Atlanta?
Well, and there's Justin Fields too. If the Bears go ahead and draft Caleb Williams, what a fascinating next couple months are really unfolding right now. Where does Vrabel wind up, Albert?
Yeah. I feel like Vrabel is I think Vrabel. I think he's he might wind up being the best guy in the market just because of age, right? Now he doesn't have the accomplishments that Bill and Jim have, but just because of age, like he's still in his 40s, like I think he might actually be the best prospect, if you want to call him that, of the guys in the market. I would say right now it feels almost like he's running second a bunch of places. Like I think Seattle could hire him. Like I think Seattle, I think John Schneider would really look at that, maybe over Dan Quinn. But like Dan Quinn's the presumed leader in the clubhouse there. I think the Chargers would look at hiring him if Jim Harbaugh were to leave them at the altar. I think the Falcons would look at him very seriously if the Bill Belichick thing doesn't work out. So it does feel like he's running second a bunch of these places. You know where I think he might have landed if things had played out differently is Philly. Like I think that would have been a possibility. So like it's not that he's not a strong candidate in a lot of these places. He is. It's just that like a lot of these places where maybe he fits best, the focus has been on somebody else. I'm going to be interested too to just watch. I would watch Washington with him because he was together with Adam Peters. Now, Adam Peters was a low-level scout, and Vrabel was a player, but they were together for 6 years in New England. And Peters said, and I believe the Commanders really like Ben Johnson, not 100%, but Peters said something really interesting during his press conference when he was introduced as the general manager there, which was, I'm not looking offense or defense. I'm looking for a leader.
Mm-hmm. So
doesn't that scream Mike Vrabel to you?
Well, of course it does. I mean, so what's your reporting on what happened in Philadelphia last Friday when Sirianni and Jeffrey Lurie met, and they're, going to put Sirianni and Howie Roseman out in front of the media on Wednesday? What a fascinating back and forth that should be in Philadelphia. What's your reporting there, Albert?
I think it's like similar to the way Jeffrey Lurie handled it 3 years ago. Okay, now when they went through that 3 years ago, if you remember, I believe it was 8 days after the last game of the season that they fired Doug Peterson. And a big part of that was Jeffrey Lurie waited to meet with Peterson and let Peterson and Howie get their ducks in a row and come up with a plan to dig them out of what was a really bad season for them in the COVID year, right? Like they finished behind Washington that year. I think Washington went 6-9-1 and won the division, something crazy like that, whatever it was. And so in the end, like the plan wasn't satisfactory, and it wasn't satisfactory in part because, Doug was really loyal to his assistants and he didn't want to clean out the staff. I think that's sort of the template of what happened here was that, Jeffrey does wait sometimes to meet with his coaches after the season and gave them time to, come up with something. Hey, here's what we see it looking like at the end of the year. Here's what we see it looking like going into 2024. Here's the plan. Here's who my coaches are going to be. Here's how the roster is going to be set up. And not like that, like he needs to win his job back or anything like that. But, you got to put him you got to put the owner in a position where he feels good about what the plan is going forward. And so I think that's sort of the way it played out. And now they're looking for 2 new coordinators. And it's such a weird thing too, Rich, because like I can remember like last year on the night of week 18, I was talking to Nick Sirianni on the phone, and he, had a beer in his hand, and he was at Shane Steichen's house, and the entire staff was there, and they were celebrating winning the #1 seed. And he said that he wanted to do this, Nick did, because his dad and his brothers were high school coaches, and they would come and hang out on Friday nights, and he never got the chance to do that. And having the bye gave him the chance to do that. The reason I'm telling that story is because there was such a great vibe on that staff. A lot of the coaches were the same age. They had kids the same age. That was a year ago, right? That was a year ago that was the vibe in that building. That was the vibe on that staff. And now you lose the 2 coordinators who get opportunities to be head coaches in Steichen and Jonathan Gannon. And you did such a poor job replacing them that you got to blow the new guys out of town now too. One of whom was on the staff last year. It's crazy, and it'll be interesting to see how they come out of this, because it's almost like Nick is now going to be chasing something that they built the first 2 years that somehow they lost over the last year.
So before I let you go, Albert, give me your best guess on the post-mortem in Buffalo that's already begun. What do you think?
So This reminds me, I keep making these comps. Like, I hope you're not bored with
No,
them.
come on, we're fascinated. You had to say
This
hello,
feels to
Albert.
me like this feels to me like the Tony Dungy Buccaneers, doesn't it?
What do you mean?
A team that like a coach comes in, does a great job, phenomenal job building it up, and they just can't get over the hump. And they've been hitting this glass ceiling for years and years and years. It feels like the Tony Dungy Buccaneers a little bit to me.
Oh,
you know?
Okay. So who's the Gruden?
And you know what the Bucs did was they.
Well, and so that the follow up questions there are who's the Gruden, and will the Pagulas go ahead and say sayonara to their coach, who's not in anybody's mind a Hall of Fame possible resume right now, despite his immense success in Buffalo. Albert,
yeah,
would they do it?
I don't think they're going to. I don't think they're going to, but it's something to think about because they does it feel like something needs to be shaken up a little there? Whatever it is.
I mean, what else is there? They, the defensive coordinator, the offensive coordinator, and I
don't know.
Tough.
And that's the thing is like, have you gotten to that point where it's like this is the only thing left?
Well, I mean, the special teams coordinator, because Bass missed a field goal, and once upon a time there was a 12th man on the field. I mean, I'm being facetious, but it really, I don't know what else to say, because the one thing we're not coming out of this game saying that one decision, that was ridiculous. Right. We're pointing at that moment they lost to the Chiefs, And
then the flip side of it, Rich, is like that. Like you go back 5 years, Connor Orr, who I work with at SI, like brought this up on our podcast a minute ago. Mm-hmm. Look at Harbaugh 5 years ago, like they were almost running him out of Baltimore, right? Mm-hmm. Like how dumb and if you go and you look at like the guys who got jobs that year, that offseason, like Freddie Kitchens, Cliff Kingsbury, Adam Gase, that's the market they would have been going into. So that's the flip side of it is like, you've got a guy you're comfortable with who's clearly good at the job. Like, do you want to go back into the wilderness?
Yeah, I know. But this wilderness has Belichick, Harbaugh, and Vrabel sitting in it, brother.
That's the thing. Yeah.
I mean,
it's
a different wilderness, to say the least.
It's not the wilderness. Yeah. And you have Josh Allen to offer up, right? Like you have, hey, come coach Josh Allen.
With the OC in place. With the OC in place. I mean, I think clearly Joe Brady and Allen's come out and said, I don't want to change the offensive coordinator. Yeah. And he also said, hey, McDermott leaves the offense alone. So I don't know what the answer is there. That would stun me, right? If that's the answer.
I think they hang on to Sean. I think the roster part of it's more interesting because I do believe like the window's open as long as Josh is there.
I agree.
But like with this particular group, it's not wide open anymore because I mean, like the guys they've won with over the last 7 years and guys who come onto their roster over the last 7 years that are core pieces, Tre'Davious White, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, Ed Oliver is younger.
What about Diggs?
The rest of these guys.
What about
Diggs, Deion Dawkins? Like a lot of these guys are over 30 now. Like, so there's like the big picture, like, do we run it back or do we start to retool a little bit? Question 2, particularly in a year when, now this could be restructured. So, the number's malleable, but they're looking at like a Josh Allen's cap number tripling next year. So like, there's just like, I think there are big picture decisions that need to be made as far as the roster goes. And then there's that question again, like, can you run it back or does this group need to be shaken up a little bit? They've obviously done a great job building there, but it feels like this offseason is a very real crossroads for them.
Okay. Albert, you're the man. Look for my call next week because obviously a lot of the questions we have will be answered by then. And I appreciate the time here, brother.
You got it.
That's the great Albert Breer right here on the Rich Eisen Show. At Albert Breer, must follow his information on point. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern for free.